Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. 2021 is almost over. There is no more UFC fights this year, so I figured it was the perfect time to make a video. Top 5 UFC fights I'm looking forward to in 2022. And before I get into my list, comment down below and let me know which fights are you most excited for next year. And also, honestly, I could have made a top 15 for this. You know, there's so many great fights to look forward to in 2022. So I have some honorable mentions at the end of the video as well, which are in no particular order. But first off, I'm going to start from 5 to 1. One's going to be the matchup that I am most looking forward to, and I really hope the UFC makes in 2022. And also, all these fights aren't necessarily what's next. I just feel like they can plausibly be put together in 2022, and I want to see them badly. So let's start off with number 5, Petr Yan versus Aljamain Sterling for the bantamweight title. I just want to see the bantamweight division back on track. They fought back at UFC 259 March of this year. Petr Yan was taking over late in the fight and unfortunately throws the illegal knee. And Mark Smith tells the doctor right in front of Aljamain Sterling, if he can't continue, it's going to be a disqualification. Immediately, Aljamain Sterling flops on his back, and the fight is over, and then Aljamain Sterling is crowned the champion. So we have a paper champion in Aljamain Sterling. They were rescheduled to have, a rematch at UFC 267 October this year. And Aljamain Sterling, unfortunately, had neck surgery in between the first fight and the second fight that was scheduled, and he needed more time to recover, so it got pushed back even later. Now we have Petr Yan as the interim bantamweight champion, Aljamain Sterling as the undisputed bantamweight champion, and now it's time to finally see the division sort itself out, because I'm tired of this weird situation where you have Petr Yan kind of, his shadow just looming over top of the division. We all know Aljamain Sterling is not the best 135er right now. And I'm just curious, Aljamain Sterling, can he make adjustments? After looking at that first fight, Yan just looks far superior to him in every facet. And I'm curious, can Aljamain Sterling come out, make adjustments to beat Petr Yan and prove that he's legitimately the best 135-pounder? I'm dying to see that, and that's why it's number 5 on the list. Luckily for us, I think that's going to happen in February or March, so you guys can look forward to that in February or March. And I'm just really excited to see those guys just sort that out. And there's been so much back and forth since that original fight. This fight is, people are going to be more excited for this fight than they were the original. So let's move on to number 4. Number 4 is Jiri Prochazka versus Alexander Rakic. I've talked about on the channel forever that I believe these two guys are the future of the light heavyweight division. Right now you have Glover Teixeira as the champion, and Jiri Prochazka is probably going to fight him in spring, summer of this year. And if Jiri Prochazka can win that fight, and Alexander Rakic has a fight in March against Jan Blachowicz, the former champion, if Rakic can win that fight, then we are going to see Jiri Prochazka versus Alexander Rakic for the light heavyweight title if they can both win their next fights. And I just love this fight. Jiri Prochazka, for only having a couple fights within the UFC, this guy is a fan favorite. He fights like an absolute madman. He has the ponytail on the top of his head, hands down at the waist, rushing forward. I'll never forget that spinning back elbow KO of Dominic Reyes. And if he can beat Glover Teixeira, and that's a big if. I know a lot of people overlook Glover Teixeira. I did in the Jan Blachowicz fight. But if he can get by Glover Teixeira and Rakic beats Jan Blachowicz, the UFC has to match these two up. And I've said for a while this fight has been talked about for a while, it's one of those fights that I kind of didn't want the UFC to make because I felt like one day we would see these two guys fighting for a title. And I hope that this matchup happens in 2022. Alexander Rakic, super well-rounded skill set, on a long win streak himself, just been dominating guys. His last fight wasn't the most exciting, but either way, we can see the skills are there. He's a massive 205er. He has great striking. He has great ground game, great takedowns. And Prochazka, there's no way Prochazka is ever going to be in a boring fight the way he fights. So that's why that's number 4 on the list. Let's move on to number 3. And I think a lot of people are going to love this fight and hope that this fight happens in 2022 as well. It is Charles Oliveira versus Islam Makhachev. This is a fight that there's a little bit of a hurdle, for this fight to happen as well. We got Charles Oliveira. Supposedly his next title defense is going to be against Justin Gaethje, and that's a massive challenge for Charles Oliveira. But if he can get over it, I believe that Islam Makhachev is probably going to be next. Islam Makhachev is taking on Beneil Dariush in February, so Islam has to win his fight as well. But if both those guys can win their fights, that has to be the next fight for the lightweight title. And what I love about this fight is this is a version of Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Tony Ferguson. Obviously, it's not the same fight, but you have very similar styles. You have Islam Makhachev, who just wants to take you down and grind you out. And you have Charles Oliveira, who's amazing off his back, but also has great striking, great pressure on the feet. So I feel like this can be, in a way, in a different universe, this can be the Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Tony Ferguson fight we never had. And I absolutely love this matchup. I mean, can you imagine? We know Islam doesn't have the best striking on his feet, but he takes guys down and mauls them and submits them. But against Charles Oliveira, I don't know how he does that, but I would love to see him try. Charles Oliveira, you try to take him down. You know, he has lightning fast submissions. He has great striking on the feet. And I just would love to see these two guys matched up, because does Islam Makhachev even take him down? I don't know, because it's going to be tough on the ground against Charles Oliveira. He's constantly looking for submissions, and I just would love to see this fight. Both guys are young. Both guys are in their prime, and it would be for the undisputed lightweight title. Obviously, they both have fights to win, but if they can win those fights, this is the fight that I'm dying to see in 2022. Next up on the list, and I think this could be number one for a lot of people, and that is Kamaru Usman defending his title against Khamzat Chimaev. We have a bunch of hurdles to get over to get to this fight as well. Usman, we don't know who he's defending the title against next. It's probably going to be Leon Edwards. Khamzat Chimaev is at least going to have to fight one, if not two more times before he gets a title shot. But with his name value, if they book Khamzat Chimaev against the top 5 guy next, which Bilal Muhammad wants it, Gilbert Burns wants it, there's plenty of guys who said they would fight Khamzat. If Khamzat can get a win over a top 5 guy, I think the UFC is going to give him a title shot off of that win alone. So Usman might defend his title once, Khamzat gets one win, and then they book these two guys up at the end of the year. And I love this fight because Khamzat Chimaev has so much hype around him, and his grappling looks absolutely amazing. What he did to Li Jingliang at UFC 267 was amazing. He dominated him. He carried him over to Dana White. Then he beat him up and eventually submitted him. And Kamaru Usman, I don't want to say he's looked unbeatable, because both Colby fights were competitive and he got hurt by Gilbert. But Kamaru Usman just looks like he's getting better each and every time out. To face the adversity in the Gilbert Burns fight back in February this year, then to go on and KO Masvidal with the right hand the way he did, then go on to beat Colby in a rematch, which a lot of people thought Colby may have his number after that lightning close fight back in 2019. I want to see Khamzat Chimaev try to challenge Kamaru Usman. And I've said this before, anybody that can keep it on the feet with Kamaru Usman has a chance to beat him. Kamaru Usman does not have that great of striking. He's been able to improve fight after fight, but still Khamzat Chimaev looks like he has a level of grappling where he does not have to worry about the takedown of Kamaru Usman. Jorge Masvidal got KO'd because he was too worried about the takedowns of Kamaru Usman. Khamzat probably doesn't have to worry about that. So in this fight, it could be one of those fights just like the Colby fight where it cancels each other out and then they have to strike. And if Khamzat, his striking has looked so good. We have seen a very limited sample size with his striking. We've seen the beautiful right hand KO of Gerald Meerschaert, which has aged so well at this point. But I'm just curious, can you imagine the amount of hype that we would get for a Kamaru Usman who's just beat Leon Edwards? Then maybe we get a Khamzat Chimaev who's just defeated, Colby Covington or Gilbert Burns or Bilal Muhammad. That fight would be huge, and there's a lot of Khamzat Chimaev fans that think he is the guy to beat Kamaru Usman. So that's why that is number 2 on my list. Number 1 on my list, if you've been following my channel for any period of time, you probably know what fight this is, because I've talked about that this is the fight that I really want to see, and I really think this has a very high probability of happening in 2022. And that is Francis Ngannou versus John Jones. Obviously, Francis Ngannou has to beat Cyril Gane. He's fighting him next at UFC 270 in January, so only a couple weeks away. He has to beat Cyril Gane, and that's a big if. But if Francis Ngannou beats Cyril Gane, there's really no next deserving contender at heavyweight. I guess you could throw Stipe back in there, but John Jones says he's ready to make his UFC heavyweight debut in 2022. the UFC and Dana White, they know. Dana may say all these things about Jon Jones, and Jon Jones may be acting like a scumbag outside the cage, but Dana White and the UFC knows how much money a Francis Ngannou defending his heavyweight title against the consensus light heavyweight GOAT in Jon Jones would generate. That would be one of the biggest pay-per-views of all time, and there's no reason the UFC wouldn't book it. And can you imagine Jon Jones with his super high fight IQ versus Francis Ngannou, who just wants to come out there and take your head off? And then imagine if in between, I'm excited for it right now. If it was scheduled right now, I'd be excited. Imagine if Francis Ngannou goes out there and knocks out Ciryl Gane, which Ciryl Gane, I know it's a weird comparison, but he's very similar to Jon Jones. Ciryl Gane, super well-rounded everywhere, doesn't have any crazy power, but he has a great variety of attacks. He has great striking. He has great wrestling. He has great jiu-jitsu. He's just really good everywhere. And Jon Jones is the same way, super well-rounded. But Francis Ngannou has that unbelievable nuclear power. And if he goes out there and finishes Ciryl Gane, I think Francis Ngannou versus Jon Jones has to be the fight to make. Summer of 2022, Ngannou versus Jon Jones. And I love that fight so much. I would, try everything I could to possibly go see that fight live, because to see Jon Jones, I know people say he lost some of these close decisions, but to see him go out there, imagine the tension as him and Francis Ngannou were just kind of feeling each other out. And we know Francis Ngannou is going to try to explode. And then also, I want to see what Jon Jones' body looks like at 265. He says he wants to come in at 265. I want to see what his wrestling looks like, what his striking looks like. Has he slowed down? So that's why that's my most anticipated fight of 2022. Francis Ngannou defending his heavyweight title against Jon Jones. Now for some honorable mentions, just because there is so many great fights to look forward to in 2022. I wanted to throw a couple extra fights in this video. First off is Giga Chikadze versus Max Holloway. I don't really think this is super realistic to happen in 2022, but it's very possible. Giga's fighting Calvin Kattar in the first fight in 2022. If he defeats him, he's probably next in line for a title fight. But Max is probably next in line for a title fight right now. So Max could beat Volkanovski in the trilogy. Giga could beat Calvin Kattar in, the fight night, in the beginning of January. And then we could see Giga Chikadze versus Max Holloway for the featherweight title. And I love this fight because Max Holloway has looked so good, but he is very hittable. And Giga Chikadze's kickboxing has looked unreal. He's been calling out Max Holloway nonstop. And at this point, he's kind of swayed me. I'm dying to see that fight, especially after Giga Chikadze just looked incredible against Edson Barboza, who I am very, very high on. So I'm dying to see that fight. One way or another, I want to see Giga Chikadze versus Max Holloway in the next year or so. A lot of people are speculating Max Holloway doesn't have a lot of time left, just based off the fact that even though he's young, he's been taking a lot of punishment in his fights, even the ones that he's winning. And I'm just curious, Giga's striking just looks so accurate and so pinpoint. Could you imagine if he was able to go out there and take out Max Holloway? And maybe, just maybe, a Volkanovski injury or something like that, and they could make Max versus Giga for the interim featherweight title. So it's plausible. I doubt it, but it's very plausible for 2022. Next up is another favorite I think a lot of people are going to love. I want to see Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor 3. We've already seen him fight twice. Both those fights were excellent. Nate Diaz chokes him out in the second round of the first fight. The second fight went all 5 rounds. Conor McGregor got the decision. It was an amazing fight. I personally thought that Nate Diaz should have got the decision on the second fight. But either way, these fights were so good. On top of that, the lead up to these fights was amazing. And then on top of that, it just has to happen. They're both 1-1. Conor McGregor's in a weird spot in his career. Nate Diaz is in a weird spot in his career. So why not book these two to fight each other in the trilogy? We've been teased with it for the last 5 years. I think it's time for the UFC to book Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz 3. And I think all the fans would love it. And they could even make it a headliner. Honestly, it's going to sell very well. I'd be shocked if they did not make it a main event of a pay-per-view. So, book Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz. The last fight I have for you is one of my favorite fights on the entire list. And I thought about throwing it into the top 5. But just based on some of the other fights, I think it pushed it out. I want to see Jose Aldo versus TJ Dillashaw. This would be a #1 contender fight. Jose Aldo is coming off that massive win over Rob Font. Jose Aldo is still competing at such a high level. A lot of people doubted Jose Aldo when he dropped down to 135, but he's had massive success. I know he has 2 losses. The Marlon Moraes fight, a lot of people thought he won that fight, and then of course he lost to the champion Petr Yan, or technically the interim champion for right now. But he's just had an amazing amount of success. He's coming off a big win over Rob Font. And then TJ Dillashaw, former bantamweight champion, he came back off a 2-year suspension after injecting EPO into his body. And he has 1 win over Corey Sandhagen, which was a decision win that a lot of people disagreed with. I personally thought Corey Sandhagen won that fight. But either way, people are saying that, just because TJ Dillashaw used to be the champion, that TJ Dillashaw deserves a title shot. Well, we have to see Petr Yan versus Aljamain Sterling play out. Then the winner of that fight probably isn't going to be ready till the summer or fall. So in the meantime, I think we need a #1 contender fight. And that's why I want to see Jose Aldo versus TJ Dillashaw. I want to see, Jose Aldo won the 5th round against Rob Font, and people have questioned his cardio for so many years. TJ Dillashaw, a lot of people had questions on his cardio coming back from the suspension. He had 5-round cardio against Corey Sandhagen. He was cut up badly. Supposedly he was injured at some point. And I just want to see these two matched up. Can you imagine a 5-round main event fight night card? Jose Aldo versus TJ Dillashaw for a #1 contender spot to fight the winner of Petr Yan versus Aljamain Sterling. I would absolutely kill for that fight. Jose Aldo just looks like he's getting better with age. It feels like he's been around forever. A lot of people have doubted if he can have success this late in his career, just considering how long he's been fighting. But he looks so good in the Rob Font fight. He faced adversity, came back to win, and even really dominant in some of those rounds, hurting Rob Font badly in some of those rounds. And I just really want to see Jose Aldo versus TJ Dillashaw in 2022. So don't forget to comment down below and let me know what fights you are most excited for in 2022. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it, and thank you so much for watching.